back to another episode of the Anti-Diet Club podcast. I am here with my co-host Gillian, who is making me laugh before we've even hit record this morning, because we are back with an episode all about wellness, healthism, orthorexia, and all things clean eating. And this could be a long episode, right?
We've just had so much fun even before we hit record talking about how insanely ridiculous this is. And we're kind of taking the piss out ourselves as well, which we're going to share with you because we were deep in it, right? And it's so, oh God, it's so good to have some humor around what we did. Right. Yeah. And this is no shade to anyone who's deep in it, who maybe loves some of the stuff that we're talking about. But we do want to shed light on where dieting can then morph into this. It's not about thinness, it's about health.
Yeah. Because yeah, go on.
No, you go on.
I was just going to say, because I know that like I'm seeing like a real pattern with like diets have cottoned on that we know diets don't work. Okay. And I think there's this real shift in, okay, let's not talk about dieting. Let's talk about really controlling our health, because again, it's reaching a pain point, a fear factor that people have got underneath. We all want to like hold on to our health and as best we can. Of course we do. It's like an underlying kind of feeling for everybody, I think. And that scaremongering and that fear mongering and tapping into, well, if we can't promote, being, because it is still promoting thinness, but it's promoting it through another route. It's like naturally becoming
like
thin,
a more
because you naturally just choose the clean foods and the healthy food. It is, that's what they're talking about.
It is.
It's still selling thinness.
And it's like, it's trying to sell thinness through this like morally virtuous and kind of like more ethical way. And it's not, because what the underlying message is health lives in thin bodies. Right. Yeah. And I even see this too with clients who kind of like, who first approach me that kind of get that they feel like they shouldn't want thinness from a kind of a desirability perspective. So they'll be very sure to say to me, I'm a feminist, so I'm not wanting to be thin because I believe beauty exists in thinness, or you can only be attractive or desirable in thinness. I reject all of that, but I want to diet and I want to lose weight for my health. That somehow is okay. Yeah. And I get it. We all care about our health, right?
I think we've all said that though, haven't we?
We all want to live long, healthy lives.
Like, because we also have this idea, because of the society we live in, that thinness does equate to health.
Yeah.
But there's so much like with the like wellness kind of trends that is really just about, if you just eat a certain way, if you just, do all these little steps, it will just happen without you even trying. And it's just not true.
I want to ask you, what was your relationship with kind of like this whole clean eating, what did that look like for you in terms of pursuing health and not necessarily thinness from a kind of physical aesthetic point of view?
I mean, I don't think I ever separated the two really, because in my mind it was very clear that I just wanted to be thin. Or thinner, and I wanted to be able to actually, what I was really looking for was trying to keep the weight off. I wanted it gone forever. I didn't want it gone for 5 minutes. I had done that. By the time I got to like wellness stuff, I had done the pursuit of like dieting, typical dieting that we understand, the Slimming Club kind of stuff. And by the time I kind of discovered some of these like real clean eating books that were around at the time, I'm trying to think when it would have been, probably like 2016 to 17, perhaps, that sort of time. So around the time I had very, very young kids, and like, and in the middle of like a really busy job and like moving house and all the like lots of big life-changing stuff happening. And I found myself just tearing myself in knots, because not only did I not particularly want like all the things that were being offered, I found it really hard to get the ingredients because they don't sell half the stuff I was trying to find in the local Tesco's. And I don't have time to be going around, you know, pushing my baby around in a pram or in between job or whatever I was doing to go and find and source all these kind of random things that I couldn't even pronounce. I couldn't explain to my husband why we suddenly needed to be eating all this really random stuff when normal, you know, accessible food was perfectly fine the day before. And suddenly here I am buying a bag of almonds when I'm trying to work out whether I could get away with buying some cloths to milk an almond in the name of health because I thought it was going to make me thin. And the amount of things that I bought.
So what, you never made your own milk?
I just know that you did. I just know that
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did.
You had all the stuff.
I bought the cloth. I made my own milk.
Oh, honey, but I just can't help it because I'm just like, at the time I would have been like, oh my God, you're just so much better than me. You're a better human being than me.
I was running a 3.65 million pound a year organization, and I found the time to make my own fucking milk. This is how deep in it I was, right? We're gonna have to cut this and come back and just get these giggles out of our system.
I said, well, no, you can't imagine because you did it. I just like honestly, like
I did it, and you better believe there was the rolled up protein balls
on your counter ready just in case someone dropped by with the sesame seeds on the outside. I wish I'd known you then. Maybe you could have helped me actually do it. Oh, honest to God, I just couldn't do it. I just found it so hard. Even just making like a simple soup out of some of these books, I was like, oh my God, what is that ingredient? Some of it I still have in my cupboard now. So I have a bag of chia seeds, or however you pronounce them, that I might just post to Gwyneth Paltrow because honestly, I just don't even know what I'm going to do with them.
She can have them back. Oh my God. When I moved, I was like, what's this maca powder? Like, what's this matcha? Like, there was all this stuff that I bought. You're right, the goji berries that had like dried up. They were completely dried and shriveled. But I was like, these cost me 30 quid. I'm keeping them. You know,
honestly, I have nothing against goji berries though, because I actually quite like. I don't mind them at all. A bit like cranberries, really. I don't mind them. Yeah, but like, they don't need to. They don't need to have such a moral value, or like they don't need to be like, I just think again we got to get into like how these like superfoods are like promoted and then, you know, sold to everybody who can, you know, afford them, and everyone who can't is just made to feel like they're just not doing the right things because they haven't got the access.
Yeah, it is about access. We're going to get into all of it. My journey with healthy eating was definitely, I was struggling to kind of name the year, but I think you're right. It was probably about 2016, because 2015 was when I officially quit dieting, right? Okay. So I was done with the slimming clubs. I was done with all the programs and the counting and the fitness apps. I was done with all of that. And I kind of discovered, I mean, my gateway was, I'm not going to name her, but there's a very well-known kind of London influencer who now has a food company, but has a lot of cookbooks and a deli in London. And I was obsessed. I still have all the cookbooks, right? My girlfriend refers to them as like, every time I pick one up to make something, she's like, that's a cult. We're not making anything from that. And you're right. Like half the stuff is like, you need to shop in a health food store to get all the stuff. Yeah. But I went to see her speak. Like, I was a proper disciple. I went to her deli in London. I live in Edinburgh. Yeah, I did the whole thing.
The front door.
No, I was so committed. Like,
this is what I mean.
She was the guru, right? She was the guru. She was like, I'm going to be a better human being if I eat all this food. And it was a case of like, and yet I hadn't made peace with the fact that, you know, I'm naturally in a bigger body. I definitely had made peace with that, but I was so sick of being like controlling and rigid with my food in terms of quantity. And I also began to recognize that a lot of the diet food just wasn't making me feel good. And I started to get into this place of like, oh my God, diet food is processed, and processed is bad.
Okay.
So I'm gonna eat only like whole foods. And even that fucking word, like whole food, like what even is that, right? Whole foods, natural foods, got heavily into like organic foods. I was like washing everything because I was, and this is, you know, for any listeners out there who've heard the term orthorexia, I wouldn't say I had orthorexia, but I would say I had very, very strong orthorexic tendencies. And it comes from a place of fear, right? One of the books that I read, and this is what got me to end up studying nutrition, right?
Yeah, right.
I went to really like the place I went to study nutrition is the epitome of diet culture. It's the epitome of everything's going to kill you. Gluten's bad, dairy's bad, eggs bad, fish is bad, meat's bad, like the whole fucking thing. Like by the time I'd finished my coaching certification in nutrition, I was feeding a lot of foods. I read the China study, which is the size of like 5 Bibles. And it basically, the end of it is like, don't you dairy eggs. Don't you dare like eat milk, drink milk. Yeah, it was really, really scary. And I even hear from some folks, because I work with a lot of folks who have a lot of fear around foods, and it can even for some folks get into beyond food as well. So like things like laundry detergents. And like what you're using to clean your house with. And it gets into this like fear of like toxins and all of that stuff. And you've seen this. We joke about this a lot that we see on the internet about like cleanses and cleansing toxins and like parasites from our body. And I like got riddled with, I was like, when I was training to become a coach, I was like, my first career was in interior design. And I remember working with a client who had incredible means and resources. And she was basically having me like knock down walls to double the size of her kitchen in order to accommodate all this stuff that we're talking about. And she had people come in to like make the fucking milk, right? Like, jeez. I am not kidding. And that just like, that just added to the whole kind of fear around it. And it was all kind of quote unquote in the name of health. But the truth of it is it wasn't really, as Christy Harrison says in her book, it's a diet by any other name, right? And that is what the 21st century wellness industry has done. It's morphed dieting into this pursuit of health above all else. And I think in the last podcast, I joked about how my ex-husband thought dieting was my hobby because it was the only thing I did outside my work was make fucking milk, roll protein balls, and go and watch this woman on stage talk about food as medicine. That was my life.
I know.
And that's not health.
No,
it's not health. It's fear.
You know, it's fear, but it's also not accessible because again, like if anybody is listening to this thinking, well, I, you know, like to use different products in my house and I like to eat some way, that's fine. If you enjoy it, if you have the means to afford it, fine. Yeah. But it's just also being careful, like what you think what you think it is actually giving you, because the shock comes when your health changes, you know, which it does for all of us at different periods in our life. You know, I want to say like my mum is quite into, not this extreme, but she likes her food a certain way, and she makes her own muesli and makes her own bread and little bits and pieces like that. That was the first thing she said to the doctor when she was diagnosed with a chronic illness, with, you know, something that she can't get rid of, is, but I make my own bread. Those words actually came out of her mouth. She said, I make my own bread. How is this happening to me? Because she had believed, and she didn't have orthorexia. And she wasn't someone who identified as doing clean eating at all. But she had this idea in her mind that if you eat a certain way, you are guaranteed health. And that is what really gets to me, because it's false. And some people, you know, we've got to talk about the fact that, you know, some people have never had this perfection of 100% health. Because
what even is that? What
exactly.
even is it that we're trying to pursue? This is the thing, right? Sorry to jump in, but I'm like, I can feel a fire like starting up inside me when you start like naming this idea of really what we've come to know as healthism, right? Healthism, this thing that we owe people good health, that we should always be sort of in pursuit of best health, and how best health is portrayed in the West now in the 21st century is, as we've named many, many times before in this podcast, it lives in young bodies, it lives in straight bodies, it lives in cis bodies, it lives in white bodies, it lives in wealthy bodies, right? All the things. And did I say thin bodies? Of course, right? Thin bodies. And not only are, do many of us not hold those identities, but these chronic conditions that people develop through no fault of their own are never, ever, no matter what they do, no matter what they eat, no matter how much money they have, is never going to be free of that chronic condition. People with disabilities, right? Health is portrayed as looking this certain way, and it is so effed up.
But it's perpetuating.
It's perpetuated
ableism and healthism and everything else, and racism. It's and perpetuating racism, absolutely. All of this, and weight oppression and weight stigma. It's just feeding into every single narrative that every single form of oppression that you can consider. This is feeding into it, and it's so damaging. It's so damaging.
Yeah. And people can really spend a lot of their time and their energy and their money pursuing, especially now that we're in this kind of Instagram influence culture, right? That I'm getting back to the person who was my gateway drug to orthorexia. She now has an app, and I was on that app because I wanted the recipes, and then it very, very quickly turned into a tracking app of tracking what you eat, and then movement, right? And of course, I'm a yoga teacher, so there was a lot of yoga classes, and I was kind of interested in that, but it very quickly became every yoga teacher was young, was thin, was super, super flexible. The type of yoga was vinyasa, which we herald as being this kind of fast-paced sort of gymnastic style yoga. And it was at the time when my eyes were being opened to this, and I was like, I am paying to uphold this. I am paying. It was only £1 a month or whatever, but I'm supporting this, and it is not representative, and it is so whitewashing health, and I was just like, absolutely not any longer. We need to see that especially I often point my clients towards what we have come to kind of know as the social determinants of health, right? So you can Google social determinants of health, and there'll be, it'll come up in various different pie charts, and depending who's kind of putting forward this information, the proportions will be slightly different. But what it will tell you is, when we look at what influences our health, and we're led to believe, especially in January, do you get your clients to do this? I'm often like, draw me a circle. So we're drawing a pie chart. Show me or tell me, slice that pie, what contributes to health. And so often I'll get a line down the middle, and on one side will be food, and on the other side will be exercise. And that's what people believe 100% influences health. But actually, when we look at the social determinants of health, whether it's the CDA or the World Health Organization that publish it, they show time and time again that it is genetics, it is environmental factors, it's things like education, our job, our access to safe green spaces, the crime rate, healthcare, a huge one, healthcare, air pollution. Massive. All of that stuff is actually what contributes to our health. And guess what is one of the biggest predictors of chronic stress is weight stigma, right? What is one of the biggest predictors of physical negative health outcomes is yo-yo dieting, right? We forget that like this pursuit of health has costs to our health. And they did for me.
The stress of trying to stick to it. And also, like I was saying earlier, the shame of not being able to make that happen. And the shame of just not being that person who just naturally just grabs a handful of blueberries every time I needed a snack because it's a superfood. You know, it's just, but it's leaking into like day-to-day like general diets as well, because I remember going on one of those popular ones where you go to a club and they mark the foods in the book. You get a whole book with every food you could imagine in it. And before you eat anything, you've got to flick your way through this book. And when you're looking at fruits and vegetables and just bog standard fruits and vegetables, you're looking to see if it's going to accelerate your weight loss or not. You're looking to see what, so it's actually categorized within itself to say, okay, these are all the fruits and vegetables you should eat, but these ones will get you those quicker. So those other ones, and silly little things like, you know, like take a banana, for example. What they say on this particular popular diet, which is starting to morph into wellness, is you can eat that fruit, but you eat more than one, it's going to cost you like a points in whatever. And if you mash it, oh no, you can't mash it because
you can't mash
the way your body consumes it. And I saw somebody on TikTok recently make a video going, okay, so do I not mash it in my mouth when I eat it? Like, is that not is that not called chewing? Like, I don't understand. What the hell are you talking about? What utter BS. Like,
and
honestly.
This is the thing, it's not about health, right?
No,
it is not about restriction.
No.
And really, when we think about health, the quote unquote health, I mean, I even honestly feel like even saying the word the healthiest thing, because even what is that, right? But in terms of the healthiest thing for us is eating enough food, right? What is actually going to get us, rather than restricting food and then eating all these quote unquote superfoods, right? Because you are striving to get all the nutrients that you're just not naturally getting because you're not eating enough food. But if you just eat not whatever food you like, that's tasty, that's satisfying to you, that make you feel good, that you have access to, if you are eating enough food, you are very, very unlikely going to be malnourished. Very unlikely, right? That is like, that really is a small proportion of people, and it exists, right? Especially now in cost of living crisis, with the amount of people going to food banks. But it's most likely because they're not getting enough food, not really because they're eating the quote unquote wrong types of food. But this idea that we need to be supplementing with all these superfoods, and we need to be eating like 70 supplements a day, is just, it's just expensive pee. Yes, it's expensive pee.
I'm gonna struggle to put like edit the like make our little Instagram post out of this, because we're just gonna be laughing and saying really that is just the best line. Expensive. It's so true. It's so true. And you keep coming back to the access to it, because that is just something that I feel really passionately about, that in any climate, because there are always going to be people who don't have access to this stuff, but especially now, we do not need to be telling people what to eat. We need to be guiding people to be resourceful. You know, I do not want to see my newsfeed filled with people throwing out food in January because it's bad for them. I did it. I know. So if you're listening to this thinking, oh, I've done that, I've done it too. I've done it every single year for 2 decades, where I have cleaned out the cupboards and given all the gifts that have the food gifts away to, like food banks or whatever. Fine, great, do that if you want to do that, but don't do it because you need to go and buy goji berries to be healthy. Like if you need to eat that food, it's don't give it away to then go and cost yourself more. It just doesn't make sense. It's food. It's all good. Unless you hate it, don't chuck it out.
And also what I want to say too is there's nothing wrong with feeling like, oh, do you know what? I want to make some changes in my kind of like life, right? Pertaining to health. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But what I want to say to that is, you don't have to wait until January for that to happen. You can do that any day of the year. Any day. You can do that today if you like, right? This idea that new year, new you, right?
Yeah.
Fuck that, right? That is not a thing. It doesn't exist. It is marketing. It's capitalism. It's people are trying to get you to buy shit that you don't need. If you want to start more health promoting behaviors, which I'm all for, right? If you feel like getting outside every day is going to help your mental health and physical health, go for it. If you feel like you want to start drinking more water, go for it. I'm all for an adding in model, right? If you're feeling like you need to start taking things out or restricting, think hard about it. Actually, what can you add in? What can you do instead of removing, right?
Are you getting rid of it because you hate it or it makes you feel bad? It doesn't agree with you. That's different.
Yeah. But if you want to eat more vegetables, I feel like I've been saying this a lot this year since I moved into my flat on my own. I am just living off carbs all the time and I'm not cooking enough. And it makes me feel sluggish, right? But do you know what? I've had the hardest year of my life. I'm giving myself a complete pass on it. But I know in the new year, it might not be, it might be January, it might not, but sometime in the new year, I want to start cooking again. I want to start cooking with vegetables. I want to try getting outside the house more often, especially in the winter. It's hard to try and get out and get walking, but I know it really supports my physical and mental health. There's nothing wrong with that. But I don't need to buy anything to make that happen, right?
No, and you don't need to buy into anything.
I don't need to buy into anything. So we're not, I want to really make that clear. We're not sitting here saying, don't take care of your health. Don't do health promoting behaviors. Absolutely do them, right? If that's what's going to support you to be like, to be your happiest self. But it doesn't come in a box. It doesn't come from a plan. It doesn't come from a guru. Absolutely. It doesn't come from us, right? Either. It comes from yourself and it generally doesn't cost any money.
And it doesn't rely on you getting rid of anything else. Again, the add-in model is like a perfect example. We don't need to. I think there's such a misconception of, anti-diet. And I had this conversation only yesterday with my client about, it isn't about just eating pizza all day or just eating cake all day, because naturally your body won't want to do that anyway. But it's about removing the stigma around the things that you do enjoy and you do love. But how many clients I've had where I've had to almost get them to relearn their love of fruits and vegetables and things like that, because they do love them, but somewhere along the line somebody told them they weren't a good enough vegetable, or they weren't allowed to eat them with that or that, because they couldn't have, had to have it plain and bland, and they hated it. Hated it, and I hated it.
Or boiled.
Oh my God, I had a steamer. Did you have a steamer?
Oh,
I had a steamer.
I mean,
like this 3-4 tier thing that was
I still have a steam oven, but I actually love it. But I love it because it does, it means I can like put porridge in and go away and take my shower, and I don't need to stand over a saucepan.
Yours then, because it was just.
Oh no, mine's like a steam oven. I know what you mean. Those kind of wooden things. Was it like
no,
a wooden?
It was plastic, and it was like it like had water at the bottom. And it just boiled the water and it just steamed it was just for veg, I feel. And it had like little holes in it, and it was just a pain to clean. But also, I mean, it was a lot on the worktop. It was a lot. It was not necessary.
Another thing.
And also, I never learned until I discovered intuitive eating. I didn't learn how amazing vegetables can be with other things, oils, cheese, butter, nuts, all sorts of stuff.
Roasted with salt on them.
And with all sorts of stuff. I used to eat them bland, and I used to think, why can't I just like vegetables? Why can't I just crave eating vegetables? Well, I do now, because it's different.
But they need to be seasoned, love.
Let me tell you, having vegetables or fruits with other things that taste good doesn't take away the nutrition at all.
No.
I fell into quite a lot of like influencers who would basically say that you were ruining your salad by putting anything remotely tasty on it, or like,
and I bet
only
you eat a
these
lot more
dressings, not these
vegetables
dressings.
now.
Oh my gosh, like ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
This is what we
100%.
talk about when, like, satisfaction of food, right? Is such an underrated thing. Like, you've got to like what you're eating, otherwise you're never gonna. And I know that sounds really diety, like you've got to like what you're eating in order to do it. But if you want to eat more vegetables, bloody get the oil on them, get the salt on them, get the seasoning on them, get the butter on them. Do what is going to help you enjoy them and feel satisfied around them. Food is a joy, and you were talking to me about this earlier, how post dieting can be such a joy, especially at this time of year, but especially in January, when you rock up at the office and everybody's got their salad and you're still like having the mince pies because you've got some left and you don't want to throw them out. Like,
and I enjoy them. If I'm not enjoying them, I won't eat them. But yeah, totally. You don't have, there's this time of year, I get really on my soapbox about how this kind of stuff just disappears. Like, I really enjoy like the festive type panini stuff that's out in the coffee shops at the moment. And I know that it's all going to disappear come January, not because it's anything bad, because if it was about health, it wouldn't be available now. If it was truly about society, a culture wanting us all to be healthy, none of this stuff would be available. If it was that bad for us, it wouldn't be available. You can't just ruin your health in this month and then save it in the next month. It doesn't work like that. Health is about like it, like going back into health again, but it's not an obligation. It's also not something we can manage, but we can, what's the word I'm looking for? Control.
You can't control. No. And people don't like to hear that message, unfortunately. And what you were saying about your mom is the classic of that, right? Like, your mom and so many other people out there are controlling their food, thinking they are controlling possibly their body, but certainly their health, right? And this like insurance policy, if I do all the right things, then I'm guaranteed not to have this condition or chronic illness or whatever it is. And of course we're all seeking safety, right? We all are scared. Like, the world is a bin fire right now, and we're all just trying to seek the safety that we can grab hold of, and we believe that by that small slither that is that we think we can control is going to save us, and unfortunately that's a lie, but we do not like to hear it. That message is unpopular, and you're not in control of your weight, unfortunately, are, I think, the two things that come out of my mouth that I am most disliked for. But they are true, and they don't, and that actually can be a relief. And I actually think that we can live, and I'm going to use the word, happier and healthier lives when we try and release those reins of control around all of this kind of stuff.
I agree. And I think if you think about things like your shoe size or your height, which we've talked about before, those things don't plague your mind every single day because you know you're not in control of them. You accept that you're not in control of them. It's when you think and believe that this is like something you have done to yourself, you have, it's your responsibility for the size and shape of your body. That's where the guilt and shame sits. And once you release that and you realize that actually it's just a lie that you have been told, that does take a weight off. And let's be honest, there's no joy to be found in really rigidly following somebody else's way of living and eating and existing when they have access to so many different things than we do. There's no joy to be found there, but there is joy in letting those things go and finding your own path. There's so much joy there. And we've been conscious to kind of bring that out in these episodes of like, we're not saying like, okay, this is all a lie and there you go, just move on and live with it. There's other stuff on the other side of that lie where you find the truth and there's joy there. And it's just so great because you don't have to be restrictive. You don't have to be inflexible in the way you eat because somebody didn't make something with like some form of milk made from milk.
Do you know
what I mean? I have nothing against those milks. We still drink them now. This is
I love an oat milk. I just don't make
drink those things now. We just have to make it up. If you like it, go for it. If it sits better on your stomach, go for it. I know loads of people drink that sort of milk, and I do too. So we're not saying that's no
and good. Also I want to mention too, for I guess it's a caveat as well. I, during my orthorexic tendency days, you know, my pursuit of health wasn't about counting calories or controlling the quantities, although I definitely wasn't. I was still very judgy, and I definitely had an idea as to what was the right amount of food or what was too much food. But it was more about what it was that I was eating, and my world of foods became smaller and smaller, and I started cutting out all the food groups. So, you know, I didn't eat meat anyway, but I loved fish, and I cut that out. I cut out eggs, I cut out dairy. I even think I cut out gluten for a while, because I was convinced that it was that was making me fat. What the fuck, right? So my world of foods became smaller and smaller and smaller, which again, if we're like back to my point earlier, if we're talking about nutrition and health, then a large variety of foods is what's going to offer us that, right? But dieting and this like idea of wellness is so reductive to just a few foods, which in itself is contrary to the kind of pursuit of health, I suppose. But what I want to speak to is the kind of animal rights perspective, and I think I've said this before in this podcast, that I convinced myself that the reason that I was vegan was because I wanted to like save the planet and save the animals. And although that is a motivation for me, right, I would like to think of myself as environmentally conscious. I'm a huge animal lover. I, you know, really support animal rights. But I had to, and I say this to my clients a lot, you have to consider these in the context of someone who is in recovery with food stuff. Whatever your background's been, whether it's you know, a chronic dieter, or whether it's somebody who has had an eating disorder, you are somebody who has had an unstable relationship or an unhealthy relationship with food, and that for your own safety and your own peace has to take precedent. It has to be a top priority. So for me, I had to get really, really clear about my motivation for excluding food groups, and I had to end up finding a balance. And that balance for me, and I'll name it, but not that it even matters, because I really don't want to get into the place of like, do what I do or I eat the perfect way, because that doesn't exist.
No.
But for me personally, not eating meat satisfies my you know, ethics around animal rights and the environment. But eating fish and eating eggs and eating dairy means that I'm safeguarding my own recovery, and it means that I'm still finding joy and satisfaction in food, and that's going to look different for everybody, right? So I encourage you to find your own balance in that if you are in recovery. I'm aware of the time, and we've been talking for ages, but
we could have done this for hours.
But there's a few more things that I like, bullet points that I have, and one of them is around kind of, I think we've already mentioned it, but this individualism around health and the onus that I think starts at a governmental level, right? At the top of the kind of hierarchy of putting the responsibility of individual's health on the individual. And of course, yes, there's all things that we can do, right? We can choose not to smoke. We can try and move away from like addictive behaviors. And there are things that we can do. But the biggest things that I named on that social determinants of health are systemic things, right? So when especially the government pushes healthy eating and healthy lifestyles, and we all need to be doing this and that gets my goat so much, because what that's doing is it's putting 100% of the responsibility of individuals' health on the individual. And actually what we know that influences people's health is systemic oppression and I mean, cost of living crisis, right? You think right now in the UK, everybody that's on strike, right, particularly people in the medical field like nurses, right, and teachers, those were all people that worked all the way through lockdown and all the way through COVID, and the stress on these people when they can't put food on their table for their families, that is what influences people's health, right? Not eating, not having access to enough food and having to work all hours under some really grim conditions quite often. So change that, make sure everyone receives the living wage, make sure everyone is supported, and that's actually what's going to change our health. And with the government putting it on individuals is trying to, it's like that Naomi Wolf thing, it distracts us. It's convincing us that the onus is on us. We have to do better. Even though we can't fucking afford to feed our kids, we still need to be buying goji berries, right? As opposed to, it's like blinding us from the actual things that are happening that could help us all. And that's just what infuriates me about the wellness industry, because it's so individualistic. It's so full of like privileged people. And I see this because I'm in the yoga world, right? There's no more place than in the yoga world where that comes through. And it's just a denial of the actual world we live in and what the reality of what people are being faced with. So, oh God, I'm really fired up. I just want to can you feel it?
Yeah,
I'm
I can
really
feel the fire in your belly
up
from here. And I think
I'm gonna
absolutely right, because I think you made that point really perfectly. This is just, it cannot be about health if it's not accessible to people. You cannot be telling people how to eat if it's not accessible to them, and you are the ones telling them not to eat, how to eat, and then also making it, all these different things that come out from the government, like through the NHS, about how kids should eat, how this should eat, all this kind of stuff. Again, I've had it with school. Like you come at me about what's in my child's lunchbox right now, like this is what we have, this is what's happening. You can't can't be policing people's food when people are not even being paid adequately and they haven't got the right access to things. It's just, I totally agree with everything you just said there. I think you put it perfectly.
Thanks. I am also aware that you've got a list of things that are kind of like, are they like red flags maybe, or are they kind of like symptoms of kind of orthorexia, like red flags of orthorexic tendencies?
The red flags of orthorexia, because orthorexia isn't necessarily recognized as an eating disorder, but it is recognized by many people, mental health professionals, and us, we talk about it a lot on the podcast as well, as being,
it's not in the DSM, right?
No, it's not in the DSM,
but it is still recognized.
And I'll go through the list. Do you want me to just read the list, or do you want to talk
about it? I want you to read the list. I'll tell you what, let's play a game. Read the list and I'll tell you if it's something that I have lived experience of.
Okay, so symptoms and warning signs. We might need to talk through some of these. The first one on the list is veganism, vegetarian, or pescatarian.
Check.
Which we've talked about, haven't we? As in, we're not saying that you can't that if you want to eat a vegetarian diet, then great. If you enjoy it, that's fine. But it's unpicking those reasons, and it's also making sure that your healing and your recovery comes first. Gluten-free.
Well,
because I know that people have celiac disease and also have to have a gluten-free diet. But I went gluten-free for thinness, essentially.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why gluten-free is taken off, right? Because when you look around the statistics of people in the UK that has, I don't know what it is for other places, but in the UK, that people have celiac, like it's in single digits of percentage of people in the UK that suffers from celiac. It's really small, but we're all obsessed with gluten-free because we think it's what's going to make us thin. Check, done that. For sure.
Okay. Showing an unusual interest in what others are eating.
100%. Yes.
Again, policing other people's food because you have this like moral idea about what should be happening and what should be eating and stuff like that. I've seen that. I have not done that, but I've seen that. Well, actually, I've probably thought it in my head. I don't think I've policed it.
I've been the police. I was I was the chief inspector of the health, the food police. I was.
Is that you saying like, are you really going to eat that? Do you know what's in that? That you? Were you saying things like that? Oh, geez.
But it was kind of like showing up with my Tupperware and being like, I eat this because, and then I would shame what essentially everyone else was going to eat. Oh yeah, I was the worst. I'm surprised I've got any friends still.
I'm so glad I didn't know you that. I felt like I really wanted to be like a social experiment, but so glad. Anyway, obsessively following a healthy lifestyle, which is a given. Oh, and following bloggers and social media figures. Yeah, again, that's something we talked about. Obsessions with checking ingredients.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I was like, not, don't eat anything if it's got more than like 5 ingredients, or if you can't pronounce them, or I'll tell you what the classic is.
I still can't
if it
pronounce
wasn't
chia
something
seeds.
your grandparents would eat, don't eat it.
Wow.
That's not a thing. That's BS. No, we're not doing that.
My granddad used to eat, he used to eat beef dripping on toast. Well, it was disgusting. I would not want to eat how my grandparents say, not being funny, but no. Okay. I went off on a tangent there. Where was I? Inflexibility. So basically you just can't, like, there's no like, oh yeah, it's fine, we'll just grab something. Really, there's none of that. And we've talked about that with ex-clients on the thinking of some of our guests and stuff. We've talked about that before, about not being able to just stop at a garage if you're hungry, or
be spontaneous.
You can't be spontaneous. There's no spontaneity, which hence the Tupperware. Fear of processed foods. Perfectionism. Obsession.
Can I just mention something about processed foods?
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I question this, right? When clients say to me like, oh, but processed foods aren't good for you, right? And this is what we talk about like naming the beliefs that are unhelpful and trying to like reality check them and dismantle them. I even wonder what people even mean. And I ask clients, what does that mean? Because if you pick an apple from a tree and cut it with a knife, that's a process. That then is a processed food, right? If you bake bread, that is a process.
You milk an almond, that's a big process.
Milking your almonds is a process, love.
I can't get off the milking of almonds.
So like, what do we mean when we say process? Because again, it's this phrase that is being used by the diet industry to instigate fear inside us.
Yeah, I agree.
You can move on.
Perfectionism. Well, I think that's something that goes through dieting, doesn't it? Like perfectionism, and even perfectionism in not dieting can be a thing, like perfectionism with intuitive eating, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Obsessions with dietary and nutritional supplements. We haven't talked about that.
Yeah.
Were
you big on supplements?
Yes and no. I mean, phases. I'd suddenly like, I was always into like quite a lot of alternative therapies and stuff like that at different points in my life. So at different points, I'd say supplements, I think for me would have been more around the protein side of things, like protein shakes.
Oh, really? Right.
Like all of that stuff. Yeah. And I kind of followed a very American big company that's like an MLM. With Body and Beach in it, which I think they're trying to move away from now. I mean, it was just obsession, but all those things that.
So you put the protein like in your smoothies and stuff?
Oh, I was making all sorts out of it, pancakes, you name it, and it was all tasted vile. Like it was just. I
never got into the protein because I was worried because it was processed.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I was like, I know this is what all the influencers are saying, but I'm scared because I don't know what's in it. So like, I don't know, maybe orthorexia saved me from that one, but I was never big into like pills, like supplement pills. I think the only thing when I didn't eat fish, I took omega 3s. When I didn't eat when I was vegan, I took B12, which I think is just sensible, right? And then because I live in Scotland, I take
not
Vit
against
D.
vitamins and supplements.
Yeah, I take Vit D because I'm, live in the dark. But other than that, never have been. I think I was too lazy to do.
Again, like vitamins. Not against any of these things, but if it's controlling your life and you're doing it because you can't afford to do it, and you also think you should be doing it because it's going to give you something, then that's different.
Yeah.
Opting out on celebrations and social gatherings in fear of unhealthy foods that you may be pressured to eat. Now, I feel like this is timely for this time of year because this episode's coming out just before New Year. That I know you've said before, that's a thing, that was a thing for you, and it was definitely a thing for me. I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, like I've got to, you'd have to try not to eat, or you'd be doing damage limitation the next day, which tends to be going back to like normal dieting territory there. But yeah, just that real kind of like, you're not thinking about who you're going to see, who you're going to connect with. You're fearing, oh gosh, like what things is there going to be there?
And also, like, if I did go, I would go and use it as an opportunity to be like the healthy one. I would use it as an opportunity to kind of like project my identity of the healthy person. So as I say, like showing up with my Tupperware would be like a statement of like, this food that you're providing is like not good enough for me.
It's poison.
And it's poison. And what I have in my Tupperware is clean and true and healthy. And should you be interested, I'm going to tell you all about it. And even if you're not, I probably still will. So yeah, I wasn't, when I was in my hardcore diet phase, I would definitely, because like it was food restriction, so I wouldn't go to the events. But when I was in my kind of like, well, what I would say is like my wellness phase, I would go and use it as an opportunity to soapbox for sure.
Yeah. Because and there's one thing that we haven't really talked about that I did want to touch on, if you don't mind, because I know I'm kind of conscious I'm jumping back into something, but just on that note of like, you know, feeling righteous and all that, like feel, you know, wellness and everything else like that. A lot of these influencers we were talking about before we came on air, a lot of these influencers and these bloggers and these people who are literally devoted, that they've got businesses out of these things, you know, they've got career. There's a story that they start off with. Any books that you read, they have a story at the beginning about you know, illness and chronic illness, chronic fatigue often, and how they like moved away from that by
brain fog,
milking their own almonds, and then all of a sudden that brain fog, that's gone away. I'm not suggesting these people have never been ill. That's not what I'm saying. I have no idea. I don't know them. They're not anything, you know, there's no way I would ever know whether that was true or not. What I'm saying is that fear-mongering way, it goes into these stories, and you see this like golden thread of suddenly I changed my diet and my life changed, and now I'm literally doing vinyasa yoga in front of millions of people, and I look this well, is damaging to me. That makes it, because
it's the food as medicine narrative, right? It's the food as medicine narrative. And I'm not saying that food doesn't support our health, right? Of course it does, but it cannot be positioned as the only thing that is going to turn your life around and cure you of certain conditions and illnesses. That is that puts the complete onus on you. There's a huge amount of privilege wrapped up in that, and affordability, right? And for most folks, that is just not how it's gonna go, unfortunately. And I can see you holding up Joshua's book.
I am, because we always recommend a book, and I've been recommending this so much lately, and this I just feel like this is relative now. It's Dr. Joshua Woolrich, and it's Food Isn't Medicine, and it's a really good read. So I think it's a good one if you're trying to dismantle some of these ideas, because it's hard to detach what you've been told. And also go watch the Mel Gibson documentary, right?
Oh God, watch that. But also, just before you move away from Joshua, he's great to follow on Instagram as well, right?
I want him on the podcast. Do you think if I hold this book up enough, he'll come on the podcast?
He might come on the podcast.
He might come on the podcast.
He's a great, so like, I often will refer it to clients if they're like, but I'm scared of sugar, but I have a thing about whatever it is, right? That's kind of like a bit of a dictionary, right, when it comes to like dismantling the beliefs that we hold around certain foods. And when you think about it, sorry, I'm changing the topic here, but January is a time for like health books as well, right? And I'm thinking like, how many people are there, whether they're like white young influencers, or whether they're like middle-aged like white doctors from the States who are all about like functional medicine. I mean, the nutritionist school I went to was functional medicine, and it's all about like, what's the guy that does the eat plants not much whatever, like Gregory somebody, I can't remember his name, but his book, there's I could do a whole episode about January and people selling stuff that's really problematic. But Joshua's book is kind of swimming against that tide, but it's
refreshing, and it's
year or so old now.
It is, but it's really relevant, and I dive in and out of this all the time, and I recommend it to clients. We talk about it while we're on calls. Like it's a good one. I think it's just, I don't know of many that kind of break it down so easily and just kind of, you know.
I think Christy Harrison's book Anti-Diet also does a good job in terms of, she really speaks very well about wellness culture and how now we as a society understand that diets don't work and fad diets are dangerous, but wellness, and it's all like packaged up in this different kind of whiter, shinier, cleaner kind of portrayal, and she speaks really, really well to that, and kind of, you know, picks it apart in the way that we are trying to on this podcast.
But we just got lost on some of the stuff in the beginning.
Do you have any more on your list, or was that it?
I think that's it. We talked about superfoods, we talked about the stories behind a lot of this stuff. I think I covered my list. Did you cover your list?
I think I did. I did. What's your final? We've probably been talking for about an hour now, but given this episode is coming out, I think on the 31st of December, we're heading into a new year. What's your, if you could give, let's do one each. If you could give one piece of advice or a message to our listeners who are kind of like intuitive eating, body acceptance curious, but still haven't quite divorced themselves from diet culture, and the lure of the kind of January new year new you is like really pushing hard in their minds, what would your message be to them?
Oh, my message would be, if you're not already eating that way, it's probably because you don't enjoy it. So if you're not going to enjoy something, like, don't start like doing that. You want to eat a certain way, you can eat a way without giving anybody any money or without buying any kind of fancy things that you can't afford. Like, if you, I stand by that. If you wanted to eat something, if you wanted to eat, or if I wanted to eat protein balls, I'd be eating them. I know how to do things like that. Like, I don't need to buy into this stuff. So I think just really think about, like, you know, how has it served you before, and when you've done this sort of stuff before, and really, like, what's the underlying thing that you're really, really looking for, and, you know, think about whether this is really something that's sustainable, enjoyable, and realistic. You know,
and I would say that same thing you were saying about if that's really how you wanted to eat, you would be eating that way already. I would say similarly about your weight. If you're having to do something in order to control your weight, suppress your weight, manage your weight, whatever word you want to use, like, that's not your natural body, unfortunately. Like, that's not your body. If you're having to do something to make it a certain way, that's not your body, love. That's not it.
No, that's not it. Your body has no idea that there's a beauty standard and a thin, obsessed world around you. It has no clue. It has no clue.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to leave anyone with?
My message would be, I think this is really hard actually for folk to grasp, because I don't think I really would have, if I'd heard me say this, I would have ignored me. But we think it's about food. So we go into January feeling like, I want my life to change, or I want my life to improve. I want something to shift. I'm not happy, right? And we think it's about our food, and we can change it through changing our food to then change our body, because we think it's then our body, like, it's my body that's the problem. If I can change my body, I can change my life. I want to spare you all of that. It's not about your food. It's not even about your body. Try and look underneath all of that, right? And if you ate the perfect thing, the perfect way, whatever that is, your body was like the perfect whatever, there's still something underneath all of that that is making you feel unhappy or unfulfilled or not enough joy. You can target that directly. You can go to that directly. If you can get clear as to what that is, if it isn't about your food and it isn't about your body, and you can go to that directly, you don't need to screw around with your food. You do not need to change your body. But if there's something in your life that doesn't feel quite in alignment, then go there. Go straight there. If you can find it, go straight there.
Don't waste your time, because you're going to waste several months faffing around with your food and stuff that's not broken, and that other thing that you've been ignoring because you're distracted. It's a coping mechanism essentially. But I love that. Like, it's really true. Like, if there's something you go to it. I love it. I think we should leave that, because it's coming out on the 30th. So
30th. Okay. All right. Well, happy New Year to all our listeners. It's been quite a year. Thank you for sticking with us as we've tried to figure out this whole new platform, and we are excited to be back next year with some great guests.
Oh my gosh, so many great guests. We'll see you in 2023.
Bye.